we're moving into more of a skills-based economy, right?
Yes.
Where, this is a big shift that's happening. We're saying, okay, we don't want to hire people in boxes, and we want to look at skills taxonomies, and we want to look at skills clouds, and we want to upskill people. People aren't robots, right? These are great opportunities for people. I think this creates longevity and retention. And I think even when you think of an aging workforce, this allows us to look at, well, how can we squeeze more out of people who are truly institutionalized in our companies, or who may be older people that can be reskilled or upskilled in some way. But even in that, those are pressures. People coming into new roles or having to learn things quickly. Yes, it's an opportunity for people, but these are human beings, and there are pressures that come with that.
Jennifer, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm very well, Chris. Thank you.
Nice to see you again. Is that a guitar on behind you?
It is indeed. It is indeed. It's a Gibson. I don't have any idea of the exact model, but I gifted it to my husband, who didn't know he would be as proficient as he now is in playing the guitar, but that started a few years ago, and he's actually pretty good.
I thought you was going to play us a song. I got really excited. I thought it was like the first ever performance on the podcast.
I could bring him in. If you really need it.
Yeah. My co-founder Shane, who his dad was a guitarist, so I know that Gibson is a very great guitar. I know that because I remember he would be like, "Don't." When we were kids, me and Shane grew up together as next door neighbors.
Okay.
So he'd always be like, "Stay away from the Gibson," and I was like, "Okay." As well.
Anywhere else, but not the Gibson.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're beautiful. They're really beautiful to look at.
Yeah. Anyway, how you been? How's the family?
Everybody is fine. We're just closing out the summer. So school has started again here in New York City, and that was successful, thankfully. So knock wood, that continues.
Yeah, like I think by the end of the summer, the parents are like, when are they going back again? What day?
Well, she was actually asking at the start of the week. She says, I'm ready to go back, Mom. I was like, okay, I don't know whether to be offended.
No, they miss their friends.
We're just really excited.
Robin was the same. She's like, Daddy, I haven't seen my friends in ages. And I was like, wow, I forget. And they're entertained in school. They're stimulated. They got all their friends around them. So yes, it's great that they want to spend it with us, but I'm sure they have more fun.
That's right. That's right.
Before we jump in, tell everyone a little bit more about your journey and background and how that sort of took us to where we are today in this current role.
Yeah, I have 20 plus years or so at the cross section of talent and HR. So I started my career on the agency side and really loved helping companies figure out talent, right? So that was mainly from a talent acquisition perspective, the Russell Reynolds and Korn Ferrys of the world, where I was at the beginning of my career. But that evolved into me really wanting to be embedded, right, on the client side, to take things through to full implementation and to grow and evolve, right? It was a fairly long journey to do that. So, what I did on the agency side kind of evolved into me doing kind of consulting for companies that were looking to transform talent agendas, right? So in one role I had, it was really focused helping banks look at digital transformation and what that meant for their talent strategies, right? And how they went about, looking at the organization, looking at talent, and then how to acquire and develop that talent. And then I joined Samsung. That was my foray into the private sector. And then I was recruited to Standard, where I am today. So it's been a journey. I'm very passionate about it. And so I'm excited to be here to talk a bit about all of this stuff with you today.
Love that. I remember that period, by the way, when the finance companies were going through that big digital transformation, because one of my friends was an executive there, and it was a huge shift.
Yeah, indeed.
In that space as well. And I remember him talking to me about it, being like, Chris, this is going to be an uphill battle.
Yes, and here we are.
And now there's not even in many banks now. There's not even a location. There's not even a branch.
That's right.
So we went from that being going digital to now with I use Starling Bank as one of the banks I have. There's not even a branch.
Right. No, I mean, I do everything from my phone. I don't carry credit cards typically. I mean, sometimes, and I certainly never carry cash.
It's crazy. So I know through all of that, and it kind of won't be a surprise given what you just mentioned, your background, a huge passion of yours is executive coaching as well. Could you talk about, firstly, why is that such a big passion of yours? And then we can kind of jump into your thoughts and perspectives of the future of executive coaching and how we see the landscape shifting? Because it has shifted quite a lot in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And, I want to start by saying, first of all, I'm a huge fan of your podcast and have listened to the various incredible people you've had on to talk about this and many other subjects. So I want to just be clear that, I'm not a world expert on coaching, but I'm a practitioner in terms of, implementing programs and opportunities or offerings in my current role, certainly. And I'm very passionate about it. Just when you look at the overall kind of learning, where learning is going, this continuous learning curve that we are all on, and how to really maximize that or optimize that within the organization. Coaching for me, in my current organization has taken a very interesting turn over the last few years, because we have been able to integrate the traditional aspects of coaching. So if you think of traditional executive coaching, one-on-one coaching, whether it's done virtually and in person, to talk about very specific things that you're addressing as a new leader or whatever it might be, right, in your role. And really integrating that with more of the mental health components, right, to create a more bespoke or customized and more personal journey for somebody as they enter into a new leadership role, or as they're trying to address challenges that the organization as a whole are challenging, which creates, inordinate pressures on people. And what that looks like today, Chris, for us, is, it's integrating the traditional coaching with relational, what's called REBT. So it's the precursor to cognitive behavior therapy. It's relational emotive behavior therapy, REBT. And it's great because it kind of, along with the more traditional aspects of coaching, helps people, the coachee, how do you deal with stresses every day as a human being, not just as an employee of this organization? And it really has been amazing to be able to do that, because it's a unique structure that we've had, but it's been really successful. There have been marked changes in the way people operate in the organization. And while we haven't necessarily looked at ROI from like a fiscal or a quantitative perspective, we've looked at it from, surveying and just, looking at how people are evolving and improving in their leadership roles. So it's early days yet, I would say, with that, but it's so far it's really it's really positive. And then there's another kind of third leg, or to the stool, if you will, is the integration of AI powered or digital coaching to further democratize coaching beyond just new leaders or the leadership kind of level, to people who, it's a self-directed, you can do it from anywhere, anytime. We haven't rolled that out yet, but it's something that we're looking at as like I said, as this kind of third leg. And we're talking to Valence right now, which is an AI coaching platform.
Love it. Well, there's a lot to dive into.
Yes.
First and foremost, what made you reassess your executive coaching, and kind of, or was this something that when you came in that was always on your agenda, to relook at how we're currently doing it versus what we feel like needs to change?
Certainly. There are two aspects of it. One is, coming out of COVID, I think everybody in the world, right, experienced shifts in terms of what it was to, understand the complexities of people at work, right? So we were all forced into this world where some of us adapted very well to being remote. Some people had really big issues related to that. And people were scrambling. Everybody was scrambling. How do we create more connectivity in this remote world? How do we ensure that people are getting the support that they need? It was hard for everyone. Even coming back though after COVID, we were really looking closely at what are the challenges people are facing as they're reintegrating, and we were seeing that people are having a difficult time not only connecting back to one another. So, people were kind of, even though everybody was coming back, people were more siloed than ever. And people, having new stresses that emerged, right? So having to find their way back to childcare, trying to find their way back after 3-ish years, right, of establishing either a balance of what that looked like at home with you and your husband, or you and your spouse, or whatever that looked like, or even if you're single parent, what that looked like. People made it work. So coming back into the organization, it was, it was hard for a lot of people to manage that stress. The other part of it, the second driver, is really looking at the various challenges that we're all facing and that continue to evolve in globally, that are impacting talent strategies in organizations today. So coming back to shifts in the market, so, or geopolitical things happening. Obviously, the war is happening. We're seeing an emergence of competitive war for talent as Asia continues to emerge. We are various other things that are not within our control are impacting talent, and so that impacts how we look at the business and how we operate day to day, and adds to the pressure. People are being asked to take on different roles or expanded roles, and I think when you marry that with some of the emotional issues people are having, it has created a lot of stress for people. And so we monitored both of these kind of things. And I came up with an idea that my leaders were very supportive of trying, and that is to incorporate coaching, the traditional coaching with the mental health coaching.
Love it. Well, it's interesting because a lot of these challenges that you just brought up, I think are some of them are very new. They didn't even exist
right
before.
Right.
So what the whole Marshall, what got you here won't get you there
right
quote.
Right.
Our leaders are facing challenges now that they're just not prepared for. Right. Whether it's leading remote teams or the mental health crisis, right, and leading with empathy. Leading with empathy wasn't something as part of my leadership training when I became a leader, or the geopolitical. Now every company is expected to have a stance on, and they're like, okay, how do I even react to that? So a lot of the traditional executive coaching and training doesn't touch on a lot of the things that you just mentioned, right? So we need to support them, and now more than ever, to be able to do that. Right. But I also love that you've taken this opportunity to harness the power of AI to now offer that at scale, which we just couldn't do before. And that's one of the exciting things that we can do, not just for the top of the organization, but all a couple of layers down, to give people that opportunity. I would love that earlier in my career to have that, to have that opportunity as well. But even at the top level, like you said, you're still taking the time to make sure that it's tailored, because there's always been normally this one size fits all executive coaching, but you have to meet that individual where they're at, depending on their specific challenge. And there's no quick way of shortcutting that as well. That is just hard work and taking the time to sit down and understand that as well.
Absolutely. And when you consider, Chris, that, we're moving into more of a skills-based economy, right? Where, this is a big shift that's happening, where we're saying, okay, we don't want to hire people in boxes, and we want to look at, skills taxonomies, and we want to look at skills clouds, and we want to really, and we want to upskill people. People aren't robots, right? These are great opportunities for people. I think this creates longevity and retention. And I think even when you think of an aging workforce, this allows us to look at, well, how can we squeeze more out of people who are truly institutionalized in our companies, or who may be older people that can be reskilled or upskilled in some way. But, even in that, those are pressures, people coming into new roles or having to learn things quickly. Yes, it's an opportunity for people, but these are human beings, and there are pressures that come with that. So I think it's just ensuring that there is a level of customized, meeting people where they are. And you mentioned it just a moment ago, democratizing it beyond just the leadership, level. But also just acknowledging that, people at even the most senior level who may be accustomed to running P&Ls or doing things at larger scale are still, none of us are equipped. You said this, none of us are really equipped with these challenges that we're now facing in the workforce or in the global, at a global scale. The other side of this also is that you have, I won't call them competing philosophies or, like things that are going to create acrimony in companies. And that is around, the philosophy of work, right? If you think of the global workforce dynamic shifting in terms of the generational component, right? Boomers are retiring or slowing down. You have the Gen X and millennials that are going to be the managers of our organizations, right? Starting next year, by the end of next year. And their philosophy on work is different, right? In terms of their approach, in terms of, what they expect out of work. I've been hearing a lot about, the dopamine lists that the Gen Zs and are creating for themselves to ensure that in everything they do, there's balance between putting, a lot of effort into the work that you do, but also ensuring that there's a lot of care that's being taken for your mental state or what have you. And then there's a lot of diversity that's around. The workforce is becoming increasingly diverse, right? So, this notion of inclusion should be part of the DNA of an organization. Easier said than done,
Yeah,
of
of course.
course. But, when you think of continuous learning and upskilling and thinking about what does it mean to create a fully, actualized person at work, bringing your whole self to work, I think those need to be, any mechanism you bring into the organization has to reflect that.
Yeah.
Not overly so, we have to think about profitability. We have to think about keeping our
Sure.
companies healthy. But I think that, with the advent of these new technologies and, with psychological safety being on everybody's mind, around being able to be okay to be vulnerable in terms of your mental state at work, making these more normalized conversations, I think enables us to then be more creative or more modernized in our approach in terms of how we develop and
Yeah.
coach people.
You're right. You're right. I love your point around the DEI and well-being shouldn't sit in a function. It should be in the fabric of the business, right? The
Yeah.
values of the organization, and that should see all the way through to your product and customer in terms
Yeah.
of the diversity of thought, which will lead to more innovation, which will mean, which will benefit the bottom line, and similar with the well-being perspective, that should be part of the
Yes.
DNA. And now the new generation coming through, that's not a nice to have.
Right.
That's table
Yeah.
stakes. Like, they're looking at, is this company going to develop me? To your point, is this
That's
company
right.
going to take? Are they inclusive? All of those things are there,
Yes.
and that kind of leads me to a question I was going to ask you: is with the stigma attached around well-being, how are you approaching the executive team on that topic? Because I know from speaking to peers of you in the past, they found that really challenging because it's difficult for somebody's senior executives to be vulnerable and talk about mental health and well-being. And yeah, it's been a challenge. Especially the higher you go, it seems like the more challenging it gets.
It is. It's, I'm lucky in that, you talk data in organizations, we talk about it all the time now, right? In terms of where the world is evolving and how important data is and being data literate in all facets, right? Well, that includes even about the person, who are we, right? And who each leader is a person, right? So, but you're right. I mean, I'm lucky that I'm in an organization that we look at personality inventories. We happen to use Hogan a lot. We're looking at, all kinds of data as it relates to people, and we're asking them to open up. And this is leadership across the board. We actually, are in the midst of a major exercise right now with our executive leadership team. And so that helps because I think that kind of there's a notion or a belief internally that, okay, everybody is different. We don't necessarily hire new executives that are the world-renowned leader in that field. We hire people on a how do they fit the culture? All these things that I think are great, right? And that, we can teach the hard skills if they're lacking in some area. But again, that creates a lot of pressure. And we are in a company that we're a high growth company. There's a lot of things that we're trying to navigate, just like every other organization. And so we have found that by keeping a pulse on kind of who these people are and how they're evolving as leaders, the data is showing, if you will, that, people are having a hard time adapting. And, we can't just create this revolving door at the leadership team. So we're invested in saying, look, you know, what do we see that you need? And what do you tell us you need? And how can we meet you where you are? The pressures are still there, but I think it's just this really, and it's evolving. I'm not saying we've perfected it. And a lot of this stuff we've just tried out in recent, like I said, in the last couple of years or so, there's been major success in that to say, look, we're willing to invest in you in ways that go beyond the traditional. We need you to be, responsible in terms of how you balance this. These aren't heavily emotional people. These are people that are just saying, look, yeah, I'm trying, I'm being open about the pressures. I'm not complaining about it. My performance isn't waning, but for me to do this and for me to actually acclimate or to really be fully integrated into the culture, because our culture is one of, we're very direct. It can be mercurial. There's a lot of pressure. And so we're acknowledging that. I think that, ask me this in a year and I'll tell you if it's going from strength to strength. So far, we're getting more and more momentum around it, not only at the individual level, Chris, but also it's starting to see its way into team building. So where leaders are starting to see that it's beneficial and they want to carry that through to their teams.
Love it.
To create psychological safety and a way to bring people along and say, look, the pressures that we all face are not going away. Let's create more openness. And we've got some tools that we're creating internally to help ensure that you have as much support as you need from the organization to the extent that it makes sense, right? Yeah. For both sides.
Love that. Last week, by the way, the data does support is we did a panel where we had 6 global heads of wellbeing just sharing kind of their strategies. We did an hour session. We had 1,000 CHROs join us from all over the world virtually. And one of the pieces of data that came out from some research, they asked, I can't remember the exact number, a couple of thousand executives, a question around well-being. And one of the data points that came out that was 70% of those executives said that they would leave their job to join a company who would be, if they were committed to supporting their mental health and well-being. So that's how I was like, wow, 70% of them would say, I would leave this job to go and work for the same salary, same benefits at another company if they were committed to my mental health and well-being. So these senior executives do want this.
Yes, and they want it. They want it woven into the organization because guess what? It helps them manage their teams if that is a part of the fabric, as you said. That helps them. So it is something that I think is unilateral in some ways and very personal to people. And I think it also speaks to the notion of bringing your whole self to work like that, and including kind of the mental kind of aspects of it, is not a weakness.
No.
But it's a really understandable question to say, how does the boardroom look at this? When people have to look at profitability, and how many people are standing behind you to take this role? If you're too weak to do it, then you're just not right for the organization. That's not the approach we are taking, but it's not to say that there's not a challenge around this to make sure that the balance is such.
But you're acknowledging it, right? Normally, when in my time, it was the elephant in the room that no one ever spoke about.
That's right.
And as soon as I opened up and started speaking about my own mental health and well-being with my team, guess what? Relationships improved. They came to me when they needed help. All of a sudden, we could have a conversation. And part of that, like to your point, that you have to create the psychological safety in the first place to let that happen. Otherwise, no one's even going to do that. Secondly, right. you have to give people the language to have the conversation. Sometimes people avoid these conversations. They don't know what to say. So it can be a simple guide of this is what we mean by this, and now we can have a conversation. Everyone understands where everyone's coming from. And then thirdly, obviously, then you talk about what support we can provide and help. Like there's no point talking about tools and benefits until you get those first two things: building the trust, psychological safety, and giving people the language to even have the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
And that's so why it's so important for leaders to demonstrate that themselves, and for other people in the organization to see that.
Yes.
to open it up. I want to get back to your REBT
Yeah.
coaching approach. Is that something being delivered by people that you've trained up internally, or is that something you're bringing externally? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. No, we were fortunate enough to have Dr. Debbie Jaffe Ellis um, come and she works with us. She's an external you know asset for us. She is a professor at Columbia and also does, individual counseling. But she works at this cross section, right, of executive coaching or more traditional
Mm-hmm.
coaching and REBT, and it's been successful for us. And what's interesting is that we've used it at the ELT level and also at the lower level of the organization, like around, like lower level, like
Mm-hmm.
assistants and stuff like that. So and so we have used her. She's also been a speaker at our women's network, our ERG, speaking on, how to balance yourself in terms of the emotional stresses and how to deal with complexities at work or complex personalities at work and how to just create a safe space for
Mm-hmm.
yourself and it's called the elegant solution in terms of how the approach to this. And it simply is, framing and reframing how you process certain things that are happening to you. And in this context, it's at work, right? And being able to, reset how you think and how you process, right, what's happening to you so that as opposed to catastrophizing, which a lot of people do, and then they end up, this is happening at work and I have this happening at home, and then nothing's going right, and you end up, digging yourself
Kind of
further.
feeling helpless, right?
It's feeling right.
Mm-hmm.
This enables you to put things in perspective. And what was very interesting is, within the first week, and it's not that Dr. Ellis discusses this because, and by the way, the normal things that apply to the standard coaching process applies here. So, confidentiality and all that stuff. But the two coachees that she has worked with have were very open in terms of their experience, and both started seeing a change in terms of how they approached work and the challenges that they were dealing with within the first week.
Mm.
Because they're just very straightforward tools and very transparent mechanisms that any of us can do as human beings. So we were lucky enough to partner with Dr. Ellis, and she's still part of our cadre of coaches today.
Amazing. So do you have like a roster of external coaches that you work with depending on different needs?
Yes, we've been building that over the last couple of years. It's been, we are building that as we figure out what we need,
Yeah, I get it.
So, but yeah, we're trying to, because it's important also as you leverage coaches to ensure that there's this balance between what is the employee need, right? So, you have to have a good relationship.
That's what I was going to ask. That's the reason I was asking that, by the way, to go around is there has to be a good fit.
There has
you
to
can't
be.
just bring in a coach and
No.
not every coach and every executive or employee is a good fit. This is what I was trying to get at. Like
Yes.
how do you balance that? Because I've seen that become a disaster.
That's right.
in
And
companies.
and that's exactly right. So when I say a cadre of coaches, I think it's a diverse, set of coaches that are really great at any number of things that we're noting as
Mm-hmm.
being, kind of consistent things that we need to address internally. But also the, coaches who understand how we operate. We have a lot of idiosyncrasies within our organization, our culture, as all companies do. And so it's kind of that recipe. So we continue to build out. One thing that has helped is I was able to bring in a coach who we've been working with for several years. She's our Hogan coach, but she's licensed and certified in many other different facets. But she knows our organization very well. She's been working with us for several years. And so she's now embedded to help figure out, what do we want to hang our hat on in terms of a coaching philosophy? How does that tie into our talent philosophy? We didn't want to be slapdash about that. We wanted it to be based on, you know, how is this playing out? Let's look at how these various things that we're trying to embed, how well it's working or not, and it is working. So I think next year will be the year where I think, kind of put everything in a more clear elevator kind of pitch in terms of how we approach coaching under the broader like umbrella of learning, continuous learning and development. So we're getting there, but the
Yeah.
investments are being made, which is obviously a key step.
Yeah. Many organizations I'm speaking to haven't even got that far. So
Right.
the fact that you
Right.
got a great team behind you is
Yeah.
is huge, right? And they're
Absolutely.
leading first, right?
Yes. Right.
I want to talk about some of the data that you and the team sent over, which I thought was quite fascinating. So we know the coaching industry is estimated to be worth around 15 billion globally,
Yeah.
and by 2025, which I thought was an interesting one, the AI coaching market is projected to reach 11 billion, which was a bit of a shocking stat when I first when I first read it.
Yeah.
And 72% of HR professionals believe AI coaching tools will be commonplace within 5 years. Now, you're already on that journey, right? Right now, we spoke about a few of the benefits and considerations, but could you talk
Yeah.
about kind of give us a bit more detail, right? Why you think this is
Yeah.
important, and then we can jump into some of the details.
Yeah, I mean, why it's important. So, AI is on everybody's mind. It is, where we are with AI. It's an unavoidable thing, and it's something that if used and implemented in the right way, it can be incredibly useful, right? I don't think that's refutable, really. I think the challenges around legalities and compliance and ensuring all of the stuff that certainly my legal team and compliance team are and IT and digital, everybody is evaluating and will continue to evaluate, are top of mind. And I think that's part of the challenge around this, right? You don't just it's a great platform. Let's just roll it out. We haven't even got, we're in pilot stage. We're approaching pilot stage. We've done proof of value. We've done all the stuff on the back end that we need to do. But I think so. My organization, my two principals, my two CEOs are very forward leaning in terms of, I mean, even before the big bang, if you will, on AI, they were looking at how do we modernize? What are we not doing today that we need to think about doing, right? So it starts with that DNA, right?
Yeah.
And we've been tasked with looking at what are the use cases, the most viable and productive use cases based on who we are, the challenges that we and our people are facing today, and what makes sense. So as we think about this umbrella that we've been building in terms of learning and development and coaching, as I've mentioned, this was that third leg to the stool, and something that we're hopefully going to roll out next year in terms of a bona fide pilot, which would then, proliferate. The other why, if you will, is democratizing, the coaching as mentioned. But it really is, if you look at, what do even today, people don't have time for a lot of one-on-ones in person,
Mm-hmm.
or even Zoom. They want to do them from their phone. They want bite-sized learnings. They want to, they want it to be truly self-directed. And the coaching platform that we're looking at allows for that. The user interface is simple. It's, flawless in terms of actually getting, in terms of voice recognition, voice to text, whatever. All of those things that make it just really useful for people to do it on the go whenever they need it is why we're looking at it. So I think it's the customization, the access to it, the ease of use, and the democratization of it really that are driving the why
Yeah.
of it.
Have you looked at it also in terms of teams? Because what I'm seeing a lot of companies looking at now is coaching at scale, but through teams. Have you looked at that before? into that?
We are, yeah, it's certainly, in this particular area, not yet, but in terms of teams, yes, we're starting to evolve that. And there's a lot of activity happening, not only at the holding company where I am, but in
Hmm.
the operating entities that we own as well.
Yeah.
And we feel that that is something that, I mean, is going to be a hugely important aspect of this,
Yeah.
for sure.
Back to our point earlier, though, I think one of the powerful things you have of doing coaching at scale with AI and technology is you have that ability, like we discussed, to match people with the right coach, right?
Yes,
And people that represent them, their backgrounds, their culture, their perspectives, their personalities. And that's difficult to do
yes,
without AI and the ability to do that. And
that's right.
to the other point, you can also customize
Yes.
using that. And very lastly, it can show up in the flow of work, right? You don't have to go
Yes.
to an in-person workshop somewhere. You could be at home, you could be wherever, basically. It meets you where you're at and the user where
Yes.
they're at and delivers it in a way that works for them
Yes.
as well. And it's cheaper.
Yes.
That helps too,
Yes.
at scale, obviously,
Yes.
to be able to do that. So
Yes.
it's super exciting to be able to offer that, and you can kind of really start generating those developing those leaders of tomorrow, and start kind of
Yes.
recognizing who are those high
Yes.
potentials that perhaps you may have overlooked. And
Yes.
also, especially with remote teams, like
Yes.
typically there's data that shows that those that are in the office get promoted, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of data out there that shows that.
Yes.
Now we can, wherever people are throughout the world, people have there's equity,
Oh, yeah.
there's equal opportunity for everyone as
Yes.
well.
Yes, and that's something I'll tell you, when we went back to, well, in the city here, 4-1, and then in our operating entities there, 3-2. That's, I know a lot of companies are doing that. But that I feel that the hybrid construct is certainly not going away,
Hmm.
and will perhaps become even more prevalent depending on, on these generational shifts that I spoke about earlier, where philosophies of work really are changing. And if you marry that with the notion of the war for talent, or there just being constraints, in terms of access to talent, companies need to invest and to figure out how to not only accommodate that and to enable, but to your point, create equanimity or equality around how people are being developed and how teams are coming together as well. Because there is, as you said, people who might be remote and part of, and teams who are, the remainder of their teams and the majority of their team is in office, let's say. The importance of ensuring that there's integration and connectivity there. And that has to be something that you do thoughtfully. And it has to be really woven into the broader kind of strategic framework. It can't just be an add-on. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%.
So
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's crucial. And it's something that I think we haven't fully, in terms of that hybrid approach, or that looking at the remote folks, because they're the minority of the organization, but they're key people,
yeah.
and so it is something that is definitely on our minds and that we need to continue thinking about.
Yeah, and especially as the talent pool and landscape becomes more global, as with hybrid work and
Yes.
the gig economy, you also have to
Yes.
understand the focus on the individual's demographic.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to have someone who has a coach that doesn't really
Yeah.
understand their cultural nuance, or
Yeah.
their business in that particular region, right? Because then you just
That's
kind of
right.
have a mismatch
That's right.
as well. So there's a lot that we couldn't do in the past that we can do now.
That's
We
right.
have Gen AI to be able to
Yes.
support, and we haven't even spoken about the fact that we have the data. Now we
That's
also have
right.
the data to understand, is it actually working?
That's right.
Uh, there's always
That's right.
this debate in the past. They did that 1 day or 2 day, coaching workshop actually deliver value? It was hard to gauge back then.
Totally. And now there's so much interconnectivity there in terms of how you can tie that to your, a talent marketplace and skills taxonomies. And
Yes.
then how you would
Hmm.
tie, I mean, there's just, I think, and hence why, the whole notion of data literacy, right, has taken on a new meaning, and
Yeah.
the requirements for that are for precisely the reason you just mentioned. Ensuring that we can use data to make the right decisions, that are efficient, that are targeted, that are make meaningful, that address the meaningful challenges that I think every company is going to face in one way or another.
Yeah. When you was looking at like a potential provider, because one of the challenges for people that listen to the show and I chat to is it's kind of like a bit of a minefield out there. There's a lot of
Uh,
vendors claiming to solve all your problems. They can do everything. What were some of the questions that you asked or that you had as like, these are our criteria for the companies that
Yeah,
work with us? What was just a few of those things that you're like, these are must
yeah.
haves?
I mean, from my perspective, some of these, are really opportunistic, right? And knowing, what we're trying to address internally, and then, I'll go to conferences or I'll go to roundtables and meet people, and then either do a demo or just get kind of a lay of the land on how does it work, how scalable is it, and then really just moving into let's get the right people around the table at my organization to ask the right questions in terms of a represent, I have a working group, right? So people from the digital team, somebody from IT, all coming around and at very early stages, understanding how platforms work, the user interface, that comes very early. And so for Balance, for instance, I met Parker Mitchell, the CEO and founder of Balance, at a conference, and I was able to do a demo with him on at the conference, and I was blown away. And I'm also, once we get through that kind of early stage evaluation where everybody feels comfortable with, okay, they have the structure and kind of the A, B's and C's of this are in
Mm-hmm.
play, then we have an incredible digital team who has a couple of people on the team that are AI focused, that help vet further proof of value. So we'll do that with them, but they ensure that we have all of the bells and whistles in there. And then once we get all of that done and people go through like a preliminary, it's not quite a full-on pilot, but we just have a select number of people from these various groups that I just mentioned actually try out the platform for an
Nice.
extended period of time. And then once we decide, yeah, we want to try to launch this as a pilot, it goes to compliance and legal. So that's kind of where we are once we get everything else
So how far do
figured.
you think you're away from launching Balance?
I would say at some point next year for sure.
Wow,
What we're trying
exciting.
to build with the data that we're getting from this other work that we're doing with like the coaching and the learning platforms that I mentioned, both on the individual and the team level, we're trying to utilize that as part of the case to
Ah,
be made. But there's no question that it's interesting. It's just I think people understandably get very caught up in, well, okay, we're just leaving anybody to get on this platform because the normal constraints apply here around confidentiality. We don't have access to the data. Or if people are expressing a concern over something that really should be directed to a human HR person, is Nadia, for instance, ensuring that, well, is Nadia advising them to go to the human HR person? And so, those are the things that we just want to make sure that the information that is being given or the advice being given is within the confines of, you
that's the
know.
challenging part. Yeah, right. So Nadia, for everyone listening, is the AI name of
Yes,
Balance
as
is AI.
related to balance.
Yeah, and
Exactly.
what's called by? I just was looking it up. So it's voice enabled, so the manager can have a conversation with Nadia,
Yes,
and it can
yes,
help direct them to
yes,
the right
yes,
resource or solution, etc.
yes,
So
yes.
you're saying a challenge of that is just making sure that it does go to the right place
Right.
and gives the right context.
And
Uh,
not being able to, monitor that, but you don't monitor your coaching engagements either. Do you know what I'm saying? But I think there's a world of risk around when if you're going to roll this out to all of your employees, this is compounded, right? The risk is compounded, or, the need for ensuring that there are the right levels of compliance and or the mechanics around that
That's
are
understandable. Yeah.
totally understandable.
Yeah.
Totally understandable.
One thing I like about these type of tools as well, it takes off a lot of pressure off the managers to be able to have to remember everything. So having those nudges to check in with an employee, or a nudge to say, hey, you didn't do this, or hey, send this email for feedback, but it's going to give you the AI to help write the message. Like anything you can do to sort of take off some of the burden and help support them. And it's so hard, right? So having those nudges, having AI to help you kind of write the messages, to help, to speed, all of those things. And I'm sure it integrates with your existing communication tools. I haven't looked at it.
Yes.
To be able to show up in the flow of work, like that stuff is actually practical and gonna be used every single day in their role.
Absolutely. And and it's not, I think even with your traditional coaching, or even as we talked about what Dr. Ellis does, it's to say, if somebody is whether it's through Naughty or a human interface, right? Saying, okay, here's my dilemma, or here's my issue, or here's what I want to know. It's providing tools and ways of thinking, as opposed to go out and do this. But then it's also providing endless sources of information, right? Just as generative AI does, right?
Yeah.
That allows people to self-direct. And with that comes, I think, heightened level of productivity and of development that, will keep people engaged. I think that is amazing.
Yeah. Well, one of the pieces of research I saw during the pandemic, which is reflected in Valance's offering as well, is that, and it was actually quite shocking at the time, that it was something like 80% of employees would rather speak to an AI co-pilot or assistant than their manager about their well-being. Yes. Which I was like, wow. I was like, we've got a lot of work to do. But similar with managers, right? They also, it's quite intimidating to go and ask your CEO or someone for questions. So having a tool where they can ask questions too, without being judged or feeling, hey, how do I have this conversation with an employee, or how do I support my employee's mental health, or how do I give feedback, or just list goes on, right? How do I lead a remote team effectively? Having a tool that can just give you the answer straight away and some practical things is just huge to be able to do that.
When you think about this three-legged stool as well, and with the third leg really being the democratization of it, it kind of it's helping leaders figure out how to manage themselves, right? To be the best version of themselves, but then also how to introduce that to their teams. So it's coming from, let's say, top down. And then, as you just said, it's giving people, this tool to self-direct in terms of the coaching, where they may not feel ready or they may not feel comfortable going to their leader. But it still gives them, ample knowledge and a leg up, and hopefully some confidence, right, to be able to then go. Because I think the whole point of this is that it's a hybrid construct. AI is not going to take the place of human interaction. And we all hopefully believe that. But I think it's a way to, as you said, give people a way to develop themselves, and hopefully then integrate that into how they connect and communicate with those around them, whether it's their peers, whether it's externally, with the market, or with their bosses. I can only see the benefit in it, but also understand, as we said, that the risks need to be mitigated and fully understood.
And that's the responsibility of the organization, and quite rightly, you and the team are taking it slowly to make sure that you do that, and it is ethical to do that. But to your point a second ago, I am seeing that the use of AI for me is actually freeing me up to spend more time with my team, to have those human interactions, to be present. So it's actually the opposite of what people feared. Is it like the replace? No, it's not actually replacing. It's actually freeing me up to have more of those conversations and removing a lot of the burden and the admin and processes, and I'm automating as much as I can. And I'm finding I'm way more productive, way more present for my team. I'm showing up differently to be able to do that, and that's kind of where I'm seeing the impact. And to our point earlier in the conversation, it also completely reimagines the way we learn, because now we're learning in the flow of work, right? It's not a course that I take. It's not a workshop I go to. I'm about to walk in a meeting with someone in my team, and I need to quickly
that is right,
and let me quickly ask a question to the AI. Okay, cool, great. And all of a sudden now I'm actioning on that learning in the moment, if that makes sense. And that's kind of how I use it. Like day to day, I'm like walking into a meeting, or I've got an email I need to write, or the list goes on. I'm learning in the flow of work, and it truly does become my co-pilot.
It really is. It does. And and it also is, it's this democratization of knowledge as well. And I think what it does for people is that it really instills this, we're talking about in the context of coaching and this kind of, in the self-directed manner, but it really enables people to fully realize that, there's so much information out there, right? There's so much to learn. So when you open up, a certain element of what you may be facing every day in your role as a new manager or whatever it is, it really enables that kind of continuous learning and I think access to this portal, this world of information that you can then refine or take forward, and just hopefully, and that was my point earlier about saying, hopefully it can help people instill a level of confidence where, okay, it's not that I'm a bona fide expert in A, B, or Z, but my thinking has evolved, and I really feel more confident bringing some ideas or feelings that I'm having, or other vulnerabilities or whatever it is, to my superior or whomever. I think it has so much potential there. And and to your point, I think it frees up managers or helps them stay really focused. And I just think it allows folks and their superiors to meet in the middle,
I'm with you.
and to approach things in a more creative, very bespoke and customized way, where people feel I'm an individual here at work and my individual needs are being addressed, and I have the tools to do it myself as well.
Yeah, which empowers people, right?
And
that leads to retention, and that leads to more engagement. The list goes on.
More productivity, absolutely.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about this forever. I've got to let you go.
I do too.
I feel like I got let you go at some point. Is there anything that we haven't covered, Jennifer, that we've missed that you wanted to make sure that we cover?
I don't think so. I mean, I think as these subjects evolve, there are these a few folks that I mentioned today. Anna Tavis, I think I mentioned, or maybe it was in the note I sent you. Anna Tavis, who's at NYU, Dr. Ellis, who I mentioned, and Parker Mitchell from Valence. They're all really interesting folks to have at some point, perhaps on your podcast.
It'd be amazing. Well, and for anyone listening right now, I'll link to all of their profiles in the description, so you can check them out if you want to connect with them. Obviously, you've heard great things firsthand from Jennifer, so we'll tag them below. And well, firstly, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate you sharing your journey. And that's the important thing. It is a journey. This isn't this isn't a project that ends next week. It's constantly going to be evolving. So thank you for sharing where you are so far on that. We'll have to do a check-in like a year from now, like once you've kind of rolled it out, and you can kind of tell me from from this conversation where we are. We definitely should schedule that in. That'd be fun.
Or even 3 months from now.
Yeah. We'll do a series of your implementation and see.
I'm honored to be on. I really love your podcast. I mean it. And you've covered pretty much everything, and the people you have on are really awesome. So I appreciate the opportunity and can't wait to see where this goes.
Yeah. Well, I hope I'll see you soon at the next event in the US. So we'll see if we'll get to meet face to face as well. It'll be cool. But apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, and I appreciate you, and I'll see you again soon.
Yes, you too, Chris. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.